The shuttle hit the ground like a meteor, carving a trench of molten rock across the barren plateau. Marcus Cole saw it from 3 kilometers away, a streak of fire against the purple sky of Tarsus Prime. He was supposed to be checking salvage markers near the old mining complex, but the moment he saw that trajectory, the way the vessel tumbled without thrust correction, he knew everyone aboard was already dead or seconds away from it. Everyone except whoever he could reach first. Marcus slammed the accelerator on his transport and rocketed toward the crash site. His radio crackled with automated warnings about hull breach, toxic atmosphere, and structural instability. He ignored every one. The wreckage was a twisted sculpture of burning metal, its diplomatic markings barely visible through the flames. This wasn't some cargo hauler. This was a government ship, which meant it had the kind of shielding that might keep a passenger compartment intact for maybe 90 seconds after impact. He had already burned through 30 of them. Marcus grabbed his rebreather and emergency kit, kicked open the transport door, and ran. The heat hit him like a physical wall, but he pushed through, eyes scanning the debris field. There, a section of hull that looked less mangled than the rest, a door half torn from its frame. He grabbed a pray bar from his belt and jammed it into the gap, throwing his full weight against it. Metal screamed. Fire licked at his arms. The door gave way. Inside, smoke choked the air. Emergency lighting flickered red. Marcus pulled his rebreather tight and moved deeper, checking every seat, every corner. Most were empty, ejected during the descent, or thrown clear on impact. Then he saw her, strapped into a reinforced crash seat, head lolled to one side, blood running down her temple. Young, maybe early 30s, dark hair matted with sweat and debris. He didn't think. He just moved. Marcus cut her restraints with his knife, caught her as she slumped forward, and hauled her over his shoulder. She was light, lighter than the mining equipment he moved daily. But dead weight was dead weight. He turned back toward the exit just as something deep in the shuttle's core gave a grinding shriek. The whole structure shifted, tilting 10 degrees. Marcus ran, boots pounding against buckling deck plates as fire erupted behind him in a rolling wave of superheated air. He dove through the door as the shuttle's power core went critical. The blast threw them both clear, tumbling across scorched ground. Marcus wrapped himself around the woman, taking the impact on his back and shoulders. They rolled to a stop 20 meters from the wreckage, and Marcus forced himself up, checking her pulse. Steady, breathing, alive. The shuttle collapsed into itself with a sound like thunder, flames reaching toward the sky. Marcus lifted the woman again and carried her toward his transport. He laid her across the back seat, grabbed a medical kit, and started checking for injuries beyond the head wound. Broken ribs, maybe. Definite concussion, burns on her left arm. But alive, breathing, savable. He was sealing the burn when her eyes opened. Gray, sharp despite the pain. She focused on him with difficulty, lips moving. "Who? Don't talk!" Marcus said, applying pressure to the head wound. "You were in a crash!" "I'm getting you somewhere safe." She tried to sit up. He pushed her back down. Gently but firmly. "Safe first, questions later. Can you tell me your name?" She hesitated, just for a fraction of a second. Marcus noticed, but didn't push. Plenty of reasons someone might not want to give a name right away, especially if they'd been in a government shuttle that just happened to get shot down over a mining colony. "Ellie," she said finally. "My name is Ellie. Marcus. Hold still, Ellie. We need to move." He could already see dust trails on the horizon. Multiple vehicles, coming fast. Either rescue or the people who wanted to make sure there were no survivors. Marcus had worked Tarsus Prime long enough to know which was more likely. He climbed into the driver's seat and gunned the engine, heading for the old tunnel networks. If they wanted to survive the next few hours, they needed to disappear. The transport bounced over broken ground, and Ellie groaned in the back. Marcus kept one eye on the rear display. The dust trails were gaining, splitting into a search pattern. Professional, coordinated, definitely not rescue. Marcus Ellie's voice was stronger now, fighting through the pain. "Those vehicles? Who are they?" "Not friendly," Marcus said. "This is a mining world. Half the operations are legitimate, half are fronts for separatist groups. A government shuttle going down? That's either opportunity or a planned hit. Either way, we don't want to meet them." He swerved toward a ridge of stone that rose like a broken spine from the planet's surface. There, Hidden in shadow was the entrance to Tunnel 7, an old excavation shaft that went deep into Tarsus Prime's crust. The mining company had abandoned it years ago when the veins played out, but the structure was still sound. Marcus had used it for shelter during plasma storms more than once. He drove the transport straight into the darkness, killed the lights, and waited. Seconds later, 3 heavy vehicles roared past outside, their searchlights sweeping the plateau. They didn't slow. Marcus let out a breath he didn't know he was holding. "We're going to have to go deeper," he said, helping Ellie to her feet. She swayed but stayed upright, one hand pressed to her ribs. How deep do these tunnels go? Deep enough to hide, maybe deep enough to find a way out. Marcus grabbed emergency supplies from the transport, including spare lights, water, and ration packs. "Can you walk?" Ellie nodded, though her face was pale. "I can walk." They moved into the tunnel system, Marcus leading with a handlight, Ellie following close behind. The walls were rough-cut stone, marked with old excavation symbols and abandoned equipment. The temperature dropped as they descended, the air growing stale but breathable. Behind them, faintly, Marcus could hear engines, voices calling out in languages he didn't recognize. "They're searching the tunnels," Ellie said quietly. "Then we keep moving." Marcus found a junction and chose the left path, the one that sloped downward at a steeper angle. This network connects to the old processing facility 3 kilometers north. If we can reach it, there's emergency transport cache there. Next, company policy for disasters. Ellie studied him in the dim light. "You know a lot about survival. 6 years on Tarsus Prime teaches you things, like how the people who make the rules rarely think about the people who have to live by them." There was an edge to his voice, old bitterness worn smooth by time. "No offense if you're government." "None taken," Ellie said, something unreadable in her expression. "What else do 6 years teach you?" Marcus paused at another junction, listening for pursuit. "That the Colonial Alliance looks good on recruitment posters but doesn't give a damn about workers once we're off-world. That governors and queens give speeches about unity while colonists die in accidents that could have been prevented with better equipment. That..." He stopped himself. "Sorry, not your problem." "Maybe it should be someone's problem," Ellie said quietly. They kept walking, the tunnel narrowing around them. Behind them the sound of pursuit faded, either given up or searching other branches. Marcus allowed himself to hope they might actually make it out. Then Ellie stumbled, catching herself against the wall with a sharp intake of breath. Marcus was at her side instantly. "Ribs?" "Among other things." She managed a weak smile. "I'm slowing you down. You're keeping up. That's what matters." He offered her water, which she accepted gratefully. "We'll rest here for 10 minutes. There's a side chamber just ahead." The chamber was a small bubble in the rock, probably a natural formation the miners had incorporated into their network. Marcus set up a portable light and helped Ellie sit against the wall. Now, with better illumination, he could see her more clearly. She had the kind of bearing that suggested she was used to giving orders, even injured and covered in dust. Her clothes, beneath the damage, were expensive. Not extravagant, but quality. The kind of thing a mid-level bureaucrat might wear, or a corporate executive. "So what were you doing on Tarsus Prime?" Marcus asked, rationing out a protein bar between them. "Diplomatic visit," Ellie said after a moment. "Inspection of colonial facilities, meetings with local administrators. Standard procedure." "Let me guess. You saw the nice parts, heard the prepared speeches, and left thinking everything was running smoothly."
Ellie's eyes narrowed slightly.
"You think we don't see the problems? I think you see reports, numbers, carefully curated presentations." Marcus took a drink of water. "I don't think you see the family that lost a father when a mining rig collapsed because the replacement parts were back-ordered for 8 months. I don't think you see the medical clinic running on equipment older than I am because the budget keeps getting diverted to military expansion. The Alliance is fighting a war on 3 fronts," Ellie said, but there was no heat in her voice. "Resources have to be prioritized." "Right, and colonists are always last priority." Marcus stood, checking his equipment. 10 minutes is up. We should keep moving." Ellie rose more slowly, but she didn't argue. They continued through the tunnels, the silence between them heavy with unspoken thoughts. Marcus found himself wondering who she really was, what position she held that merited a diplomatic shuttle. Not that it mattered. Out here, in the dark, running for their lives, titles meant nothing. They were maybe a kilometer from the processing facility when Marcus heard it, a faint electronic chirp echoing through the tunnels. He froze, holding up a hand for silence. Ellie stopped immediately, not questioning, just trusting. The chirp came again, closer. "They're using tracking drones," Marcus whispered. "Small, fast, hard to spot. If one finds us, they'll know exactly where we are," Ellie finished. She looked around the tunnel. "Options?" Marcus thought fast. "There's a ventilation shaft about 50 meters ahead. Drops down to a lower level. It'll be tight, but the drones won't be able to follow. Then we go down." They ran, as quietly as possible, Marcus counting distance in his head. The chirping grew louder, multiple sources now, a net closing in. There, the ventilation shaft, a square opening in the floor with a rusted ladder leading into darkness. Marcus tested the first rung. It held. "You first," he said to Ellie. "I'll cover the entrance." She didn't waste time arguing, just grabbed the ladder and started down. Marcus followed as soon as her head disappeared below floor level, pulling a small magnetic charge from his kit. He set it on the tunnel floor, armed it with a 5-second delay, and dropped into the shaft. They descended in darkness, the ladder rung slick with condensation. Above, the charge detonated with a muffled thump, collapsing the shaft entrance behind them. Dust rained down, and Marcus heard the frustrated whine of drones finding their path blocked. "That'll buy us maybe an hour," he said, helping Ellie off the ladder at the bottom. "After that, they'll find another way down or dig through. Then we don't waste it," Ellie said. She was breathing hard, clearly in pain, but her voice was steady. "Which way?" Marcus oriented himself, checking the tunnel markers. "This is the old secondary network. Runs parallel to the main system but was never fully developed. There should be an access tunnel to the processing facility about half a kilometer east." They walked in darkness broken only by Marcus's handlight, the air growing colder with each step. Ellie was limping now, trying to hide it but failing. Marcus slowed his pace without commenting on it, giving her time to keep up without admitting weakness. "Can I ask you something?" Ellie said after a while. "Sure. Why did you run into that shuttle? You didn't know who was inside. You didn't know if anyone was even alive. You just ran into the fire." Marcus was quiet for a moment, thinking. "I guess I didn't think about it. Someone needed help. I could help. Everything else seemed like noise." Most people would have called for rescue teams, waited for professionals. "Most people aren't colonists," Marcus said. "Out here, you learn fast that if you wait for help, you die waiting. We take care of our own because no one else will. Even strangers, especially strangers. Because we're all strangers out here, really. Just trying to survive." Ellie didn't respond, but Marcus felt her watching him in the darkness. They walked on, and slowly, almost imperceptibly, the tunnel began to slope upward. Marcus checked his navigation device. They were getting close. The access tunnel was exactly where the old map said it would be, a narrow passage branching off to the right. Marcus led the way, squeezing through sections where the rock had shifted over the years. Behind him, he could hear Ellie struggling, her breathing ragged, but she never asked to stop. Finally, they emerged into the processing facility, a vast chamber filled with dormant machinery and abandoned workstations. Emergency lights still functioned, casting everything in a pale blue glow. Marcus made his way to the transport bay, hoping against hope that the emergency vehicles were still there. They were. 2 all-terrain transports, old but functional, with full fuel cells and basic supplies. Marcus ran a quick diagnostic, both operational. "We can make it to the nearest settlement," he said, allowing himself to feel relief for the first time since the crash. "From there, you can contact whoever you need to contact. Get proper medical attention, and Marcus." Ellie's voice was strange, tight with something that wasn't pain. "We have a problem." He turned. She was standing at a communication terminal, her face illuminated by its display. On the screen was a message, encrypted, but with a header that made Marcus's blood run cold. Alliance Security Protocol, eyes only. I managed to access the emergency network, Ellie said quietly. There are messages here. Communications between the attackers and someone inside my security detail. Inside? Marcus moved to her side, reading the screen. The messages were clinical, precise, coordinates, timing, confirmation that the target would be aboard the shuttle. This wasn't an accident, Ellie continued, her voice growing harder. Someone in my own security detail wanted me dead. They coordinated with the separatists, gave them my flight path, my schedule, everything they needed. Marcus felt sick. Who? The messages are coded, but the routing. Ellie's fingers flew across the terminal, her movements practiced despite her injuries. They're coming from Commander Ryan Blake, head of my personal security. Can you trust anyone else in your detail? I don't know. Ellie stepped back from the terminal, her face pale. If Blake is compromised, who else might be? My guards, my advisors, anyone with access. She stopped, looking at Marcus. I can trust you. Me? You don't even know me. I know you ran into fire to save a stranger. I know you've kept me alive for the last 6 hours when you could have left me and saved yourself. I know you tell the truth even when it's uncomfortable. Ellie met his eyes. Right now, that's more than I can say about the people who are supposed to protect me. Marcus wanted to argue, to point out all the reasons this was insane, but looking at her now, seeing the determination mixed with vulnerability, he found he couldn't. Okay, so what do? We get to the settlement. I contact someone I know I can trust, someone outside my immediate security apparatus. We expose Blake and whoever else is involved. Ellie paused. But first, I need to tell you something. Something I should have told you from the start. Marcus had a sinking feeling he knew it was coming. The expensive clothes, the practiced way she handled the computer systems, the diplomatic shuttle. You're not just some mid-level bureaucrat, are you? No. Ellie straightened, and despite the injuries, despite the dirt and blood, there was something regal in the way she held herself. My name is Elena Hartwell. I'm the queen of the Human Colonial Alliance. For a long moment, Marcus just stared at her. Then he laughed, a short, bitter sound. Of course you are. Of course I pulled the actual queen out of a burning shuttle. Of course the person I've been complaining to about government incompetence is the head of the entire government. Marcus. No, it's fine. It's perfect, actually. He turned away, checking the transport with more force than necessary. Here I am telling royalty how the Alliance doesn't care about colonists, how governors and queens don't understand the real problems. And all along I'm talking to the queen herself. Everything you said was true, Elena said quietly. I asked you what 6 years on Tarsus Prime taught you, and you told me. Honestly, do you think anyone in my position gets that kind of honesty? I think people in your position get whatever they want. No. Elena moved closer, and despite himself, Marcus turned to face her. People in my position get what advisors and protocol officers decide we should hear. We get sanitized reports and carefully staged visits. We get everything filtered through layers of bureaucracy until the truth is buried under policy and politics. So what, you want to thank me for being rude? I want to thank you for being real. Elena's voice was fierce now. You showed me what my administration looks like from the ground. You showed me the gaps between what we promise and what we deliver. And yes, it was uncomfortable, but it was also necessary. Marcus wanted to stay angry, but he could see the sincerity in her eyes. You really didn't know about the equipment shortages, the delayed shipments, all of it? I knew there were problems. But problems and reports are abstract. They're numbers and statistics. They're not. She paused, searching for words. They're not the family that lost a father. They're not the clinic running on ancient equipment. You made it real for me. So now you know. What are you going to do about it? Survive, expose the traitors, then fix what I can fix. Elena managed a small smile. Think you can help me with the first 2 parts? Marcus studied her for a long moment. Queen or not, she was still the person he'd pulled from the fire, still the person who'd kept up through kilometers of tunnel without complaint, still someone who needed his help. Yeah, he said finally, I can help with that. But after this is over, after you're safe and back in your palace or wherever, I want you to remember this conversation. Remember what it feels like to run through tunnels, to not know who you can trust, to see how the other half lives. I will, Elena said, and Marcus believed her. They prepared the transport quickly, loading supplies and plotting a route to the settlement that would keep them away from main roads. Marcus drove while Elena worked the communication system, trying to establish a secure connection to someone she trusted. The terrain outside was harsh, broken rock, and chemical pools that glowed faintly in the darkness. They were halfway to the settlement when the vehicle's proximity alarm screamed. Marcus looked at the display and cursed. 3 vehicles behind them, closing fast, military-grade by the look of their speed and formation. They found us, he said, pushing the transport to maximum speed. Elena abandoned the communication system and moved to the weapons console. This transport has defensive capabilities. Not much, but save it for when we need it, Marcus interrupted, swerving around a boulder field. We're not outrunning them, and we can't outfight them. We need to outsmart them. He scanned the terrain ahead, his mind racing through every map he'd memorized, every geological feature he'd learned in 6 years. There, maybe 2 kilometers north, a canyon system carved by ancient rivers. Narrow passages, unstable walls, the kind of place heavy military vehicles would have trouble navigating. Hold on, Marcus said, and yanked the controls hard to the left. The transport skidded sideways, then rocketed toward the canyon entrance. Behind them, the pursuit vehicles adjusted course, maintaining formation. They were good, professional, which meant they were probably Blake's people, the traitors within Elena's own security detail. Marcus drove into the canyon at a speed that made Elena grab for handholds. The walls rose on either side, jagged and close. The passage narrowed, barely wide enough for their transport. Behind them, the pursuit vehicles had to break formation, falling into single file. There! Elena pointed ahead. A side canyon, so narrow it was almost invisible until they were right on top of it. Marcus made the turn on pure instinct, the transport's side scraping rock. They plunged into near-total darkness, the walls so close Marcus could have reached out and touched them. Behind them, the lead pursuit vehicle tried to follow. Its heavier frame caught on the canyon walls, sparks flying as metal ground against stone. The vehicle wedged tight, blocking the passage for the others. Marcus allowed himself a grim smile and kept driving. The side canyon wound deeper into the rock, sometimes so narrow they had to fold in the transport's side mirrors. Then, without warning, it opened into a wider passage, and beyond that, Marcus could see lights. The settlement. They'd made it. He drove straight for the main gates, which opened automatically for the transport's identification signal. Colonial settlements didn't ask questions first, not when someone came in hot. Behind them, Marcus could hear explosions as the pursuit vehicles tried to force their way through the canyon or blast a new path. "We need to get you somewhere secure," Marcus said, bringing the transport to a stop in the settlement's central square. "Somewhere Blake and his people can't reach you." Elena was already moving, her movements sharp despite her injuries. "The governor's residence. It has communication facilities and its own security detail. If we can get there." She stopped. Marcus followed her gaze. Standing in the square, surrounded by a security team, was a man in Alliance military uniform, tall, gray-haired, with the kind of bearing that spoke of decades of service. He was smiling, but his hand rested on his sidearm. "Commander Blake?" Elena said, her voice flat. "Your Majesty." Blake's smile didn't reach his eyes. "We've been so worried. When we heard about the crash, we feared the worst. Thank goodness you're alive." "No thanks to you," Elena said. She didn't move, didn't reach for a weapon, but Marcus could feel the tension radiating from her. Blake's smile faded. "I don't know what you think you've discovered, but I assure you, I am completely loyal to the Crown and to you personally." "Loyal enough to coordinate with separatists? Loyal enough to provide them with my flight path and security protocols?" Elena's voice was ice. "I found the messages, Blake. I know everything." For a moment, Blake's mask slipped, and Marcus saw something cold and calculating beneath. Then the commander shrugged, and his hand moved to his weapon properly now, along with his security team raising theirs. "Unfortunate," Blake said. "I'd hoped to stage this more elegantly. A tragic second attack, the Queen dying heroically while I failed to protect her. But if you know the truth, well, I suppose we'll have to make do with a more direct approach. Marcus stepped forward, putting himself between Elena and Blake's team. You're not touching her, Blake laughed. You, a colonist salvage worker against trained Alliance guards? Step aside or die with her. Your choice. Marcus, Elena's hand touched his shoulder. You don't have to do this. You've already done more than anyone could ask. Yeah, well... Marcus didn't take his eyes off Blake. Turns out I'm terrible at making smart choices. What happened next came down to seconds and decisions. Blake's team raised their weapons. Marcus grabbed Elena and dove sideways toward the cover of the transport. Blake fired, the shot scorching the air where they'd been standing. Then the settlement erupted because Marcus had forgotten something. They weren't in some isolated compound. They were in a colonial settlement, surrounded by miners and workers and families who'd learned the same lesson Marcus had learned, that you take care of your own because no one else will. And someone had just shot at 2 people in their town square. Miners poured from the buildings armed with whatever they had. Tools, mining charges, a few hunting rifles. They didn't know Elena was the queen. They just knew that Alliance military was attacking someone who'd sought shelter in their settlement, and that wasn't acceptable. Blake's team found themselves surrounded, outgunned not by superior weapons, but by sheer numbers and righteous fury. The commander tried to rally his people, but it was too late. The colonists had them. Marcus helped Elena to her feet as the settlement's actual security forces arrived. Alerted by the gunfire, they took Blake and his team into custody, and Elena finally made contact with someone she trusted, Admiral who'd served with her father, someone she knew was beyond Blake's influence. By the time Alliance reinforcements arrived, 12 hours later, the conspiracy had begun to unravel. Blake had been working with separatist factions, yes, but also with political rivals within the Alliance itself, people who wanted Elena dead so they could seize power. The messages Elena had found led to arrests across 3 colonies and back on Earth itself. Elena spent the next week on Tarsus Prime, recovering from her injuries and conducting a very different kind of inspection than she'd originally planned. She visited the clinic with the ancient equipment. She met the family that had lost their father in the mining accident. She listened, really listened, to the colonists who rarely got to speak directly to anyone in power. Marcus accompanied her, at her insistence. He tried to fade back into his normal life, but Elena had asked him to stay, to help her see what she needed to see. So he did, translating government speak into plain language, pointing out the gaps between policy and reality. On her last day on Tarsus Prime, Elena summoned him to the temporary residence she'd established in the governor's building. Marcus went reluctantly, expecting a formal thank you and dismissal. Instead, he found her standing at a window, looking out over the settlement. She turned when he entered, and he was struck again by how much she'd changed in just a week. She looked older, but also somehow more present, more real. I've made some decisions, Elena said without preamble. I'm restructuring the colonial administration. Better oversight, faster response times, direct channels for reporting problems without bureaucratic filtering. It won't fix everything, but it's a start. That's good, Marcus said carefully. Your people will appreciate it. Our people, Elena corrected. I'm also establishing a new position, colonial advocate, with direct access to the Queen and authority to investigate any issue affecting colony worlds. Someone who understands what life is actually like out here. Someone who'll tell me the truth even when it's uncomfortable. Marcus had a sinking feeling. Your Majesty, the position is yours if you want it, Marcus. No pressure, no obligation. You've already done more than enough, but I think you'd be good at it. I think you'd make a real difference. I'm not a politician. I'm not a bureaucrat. I'm a salvage worker who got lucky. You're someone who ran into fire to save a stranger, Elena said quietly. You're someone who saw problems that needed fixing and spoke up about them. You're someone who stood between me and armed guards without hesitation. That's not luck, Marcus. That's character. Marcus looked at her, this queen who'd hidden in tunnels and listened to his complaints and somehow still wanted him around. If I do this, I'm not going to be polite about it. When I see something wrong, I'm going to say so. Loudly. I'm counting on it, Elena smiled. I don't need another yes man, Marcus. I need someone who'll keep running into the fire no matter how hot it gets. Marcus thought about his life on Tarsus Prime. The quiet routine, the simple problems. Then he thought about the clinic with old equipment, the families who'd lost loved ones to preventable accidents, all the people across all the colonies who needed someone to fight for them. Okay, he said finally. But I'm keeping my quarters here on Tarsus Prime. I'm not moving to some palace. Deal. Elena extended her hand. Marcus shook it and felt the weight of responsibility settle onto his shoulders. He'd run into fire once to save a stranger. Now he'd spend the rest of his life running into different kinds of fires, fighting different kinds of battles, for people who needed someone to care enough to try. Elena had been wrong about one thing, though. It wasn't character that made him do it. It was just being human. The part of humanity that saw someone in trouble and couldn't walk away. The part that burned bright enough to light the way through any darkness. And sometimes, when the universe got it right, that was enough to change everything.